Good luck, guys. This is when we start doing our smiling exercises. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of our viewers, our aunties, our uncles, our brothers, our sisters, moms and dads. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Hopefully we're joined by our national and international family. I am very delighted to welcome you all to Wessex Jamaat's very first debate brought to you by Mahdi Madrasah. Debating is an art and many of our Wessex family have risen up to the challenge. Before I introduce you to our exciting lineup of speakers, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to the participants who have helped us shape today's debate. And this was based on a consultation we had at the start of the process. It was quite long drawn out, so we do appreciate your patience, but you have helped us lay the foundations for Wessex Jamaat's debating, so thank you very much. Whilst it is a shame that it is not an in-person event, which sadly removes any epic mic drops from the equation, we must tip our hats to our tech consultants. A huge thank you to our tech team, brothers Muhammad Jafar and Amir Nasser, for providing us with the tools we need to make our virtual event seamlessly successful. No pressure. And finally, to Sheikh Fazl Abbas for nurturing and encouraging the initial idea, supporting us through this whole debate process. The motion for today's debate is, this House believes that there can be no Western Muslim identity. So we hope to make this debate an interactive one, and we really want to hear from you all. So tell us what you think of the motion by voting on it. Join us on slido.com with the code 26950. There should be a banner at the bottom of your screen, and vote on the poll. Here we also have a Q&A section where we encourage you to post your questions and comments to the speakers throughout the debate. Keep them coming, keep them coming. Remember, you can upvote certain questions and comments. So please get onto Slido and start voting and commenting now. Before we begin the debate, I'd like to invite Sajjad Azhar, one of our Madrasa students, to commence the event with a recitation from the Holy Quran. Bismillah, Sajjad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of daybreak, from the evil of that which he created, and from the evil of darkness when it settles, and from the evil of the blowers in knots, and the evil of envier when he envies.
Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. Ahsan, thank you so much for the sweet recitation, Sajjad. Jazakumullah khair. Please, can I remind you all to vote for poll number 1 on the motion. Again, it's on slido.com. If you haven't done so already, we will be closing the poll soon. Remember, the code is 26950. You can also post your questions and comments there during the debate, so please ensure you do that. So today's debate will be moderated by Sister Sajida Jafar. Born and bred in Wessex Jamaat, like many of the other mummies, Sajida Bai is a total superwoman. She is a pharmacist by profession, although is anyone surprised by that career choice, and a devoted madrasa. She ventured into public speaking, madrasa teacher, sorry, she's not the madrasa, she's a madrasa teacher. She ventured into public speaking at age 13 with the Rotary Club Youth Speakers events. And it is no surprise that Sajida Bai wanted a way to be heard over the cacophony of the 3 very noisy younger brothers that she has. And before you say anything, that didn't come from me, came from her. So she feels public speaking is the most valuable and transferable life skill she has developed. And she's passionate about mentoring others in the area and giving them a voice. The proposing team will commence their arguments with Brother Muntazir Jafar. Muntazir graduated with a master's degree in chemical engineering in 2016 and works in the civil service, specializing in green energy and climate change. His interests include journalism, comedy, and food. We have been informed that Muntazir is always fighting Nosheen Auntie for the kitchen. Too bad this is a virtual event. Otherwise, we may have had a segment for the master chef Muntazir. Coming in second is Uncle Pejwak Hadi Salimi, father to 2 lovely children. He has been teaching at the madrasa for the past 4 years. He's an electronic engineer by profession, so I have no doubt that Uncle Pejwak will be engineering his argument down to the T. Oh, and by the way, his name has an interesting story that perhaps you'd all like to find out about. Brother Abbas Huda, accountant during the weekdays, madrasa teacher during the weekend. On top of all of that, Abbas Ba is a creative entrepreneur. I suspect he is an appreciator of puns as well, if his venture Who Dates is something to go by. When asked what motivated him to sign up for the debate, Abbas Ba said, and I quote, "I'm constantly debating in my mind about daily life, so I thought, why not try out the real thing?" I hope you enjoy trying out the real thing. And finally, the closing speaker of the proposing team is Sister Fatima Bandali. The super mom of 3 has a diverse professional background in business administration, education, mediation, and the list goes on. Fatima Auntie is a beacon of light and one of my mentors in social and community work. Not only can she put forward a good intellectual challenge, Fatima Auntie can also whip up the most beautiful decorative creations you have ever seen. Over to the opposing side.
Thank you, Khadeja. Okay, before I start with the opposing side, I had a sneaky feeling that Khadeja would introduce everybody but herself. So I had to do some quick thinking and I whipped up her LinkedIn profile. Khadeja was not born in Wessex, but I have to say she has definitely been bred here. I'm sorry I wasn't more prepared, but a lot of us have seen Khadeja grow up from those awkward years and find herself and turn into this amazing human being that you see in front of you. She attended Oakland Sixth Form College, where she was the head girl. She has a degree, an MSc in health psychology, and she achieved a first-class honors in psychology. And yeah, she's always working on things, whether it's flitting about in madrasa, presenting research findings, or organizing debates as today. But we are very lucky to have her. So let's move on.
Very sneaky.
I had to think ahead. I told you.
Thank you so much, Sajida Bai. That's too much credit, but thank you so much. It's a pleasure to work with someone like Sajida Bai, who herself has mentored me through this process.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to the opposing side. Sister Sabiha Chandu will be presenting the opening statements. She is one of Wessex Jamaat's finest creations, mother of 2 awesome girls. So in a house of predominantly female members, developing debating and speaking skills is definitely necessary to get a word in edgeways. So I guess it works whether you have younger brothers or 2 daughters. I can relate in both circumstances. Sabiha is an all-rounder, and here's a wild guess. If she wasn't a qualified pharmacist, she'd be a professional event organizer, planner, and decorator. So welcome, Sabiha Bai. Brother Fazl Abbas Nanji will follow Sabiha as speaker 2. Fazl Abbas has also delved into volunteering at the Al-Mahdi Center and Madrasa and is currently serving his term as head of the Al-Mahdi website managers. So watch this space. He's currently studying his MSc in clinical exercise science at the University of Portsmouth. Fazle Abbas has previously headed the local Ahlul Bayt Society and has overseen multiple fundraising events. So great to have you on board. Now, some of us may get a little jumpy around animals. Can you relate when there's a dog walking down the street and you run to the other side of the road? But our third speaker is definitely one with nature and a true embracer of Allah's creations. Sister Layla Dori is a recent graduate looking to improve her public speaking skills with debating. With her gentle aura and her loving approach, on most days, you'll find Layla looking for snakes and butterflies in wild spaces. And ask Layla about her undergrad dissertation. It is nothing short of fascinating. Thank you, Layla. Now, another Huda, another accountant. The final speaker for the opposing team, Brother Rida Huda, loves coaching entrepreneurs to build successful companies. You'll find Brother Rida regularly putting out videos on social media platforms way before it was the in thing pre-COVID. Outside of work, he's kept very busy as a father of 4 young children and enjoys working out and keeping fit. And it definitely pays to have a wife who is a personal trainer. Right, so that is our opposing team.
So thank you very much for that, Sajid Abai. We are thankful, so thankful to the judges for their encouragement and support from the onset, for taking the time out of their busy schedules, and for the fervor and zeal with which they have approached this challenge. We have Uncle Shabir Walji, Shamim Auntie Manji, and Brother Muhammad Hassan Banji. We'll give you more introductions about them in the coming program.
So, Sister Khadija, can we have a look at the results for poll 1, please? Results are in. Let's see. Okay, so that is a very skewed poll. So, can there be a Western Muslim identity? And 92% voted yes, that there can be a Western Muslim identity. Oh, 93%, with 7% saying no. So that's kind of flipped a little bit. So that means that 93% are actually voting against the motion. So next up is the debate, with a chance for the speakers to give their arguments and for the proposing team to level the playing ground a bit. So the proposing team, consisting of Brother Muntazir Jafar, Brother Pejak Salimi, Brother Abbas Huda, and Sister Fatima Bandali, are arguing in favor of the motion. This house believes there can be no Western Muslim identity. The opposing team, consisting of Sister Sabiha Chandu, Brother Fazle Abbas Nanji, Sister Layla Dori, and Brother Rida Huda, are arguing against the motion. Now, we would like to stress that the arguments being presented are purely for the sake of the debate. They do not necessarily represent the views of those people who are bringing them up. I'm just going to talk you through the debate process. So the first speakers, beginning with the proposing team, will give their opening statements and outline their arguments. The second speakers on each team will then come forward, expand on their team's arguments, and can also use the opportunity to refute the other team's arguments. And then the third speakers come, and they will have their turn to speak and refute. Each speaker is given 5 minutes. Sister Khadija is our timekeeper. She will announce when 4 minutes has elapsed, and then an alarm will ring at 5 minutes. The teams will be penalized for going over their 5 minutes or not using their time adequately. And this will also be taken into consideration by the judges. After the first 3 speakers from each team have spoken, there will be a free-for-all round. So this is where audience participation comes in. Sister Khadeja will fire questions at each team, with some questions selected from the audience. So please do visit slido.com. Use the code 26950, which has been appearing on the screen, and you can post questions for participants. And you can also put comments on there that we will, inshallah, come to later. After the free-for-all round, speaker 4 from each team will again be given 5 minutes to make the closing arguments for their teams. Once the debate ends, the judges will discuss their findings accordingly, based on the judging criteria, which centers on style, content, and strategy. And we have some interesting fillers while we await the judges' verdict, and we are looking forward to some more interactive audience participation then. Now, once again, before we begin, I'd like to stress the arguments being presented are for the sake of the debate. They do not necessarily represent the views of those raising them. Right, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, this house believes there can be no Western Muslim identity. I would like to invite Brother Muntazir Jafar to make the opening statement for the proposing team.
Muntazir, your time starts now.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It has often been remarked at how little Western thinking has developed since the Greeks. Aristotle, considered the father of Western philosophy, was one of the first to describe the principle of individuality, that all men have the capacity to influence their own fate and the fate of the world. Across the Aegean Sea, the then Emperor of Rome, Trajan, would march his armies to India and come across a monk meditating on a rock. He would converse with this monk for some time and tell him that we, the conquerors from Rome, believe in the number one life of opportunity, greatness, and experience. The values of individualism and experience have continued to be key tenets of the Western experience and identity even to this day. Whether it is in romantic love, consumerism, or drinking culture, one does not have to look too far to find these values embodied in Western culture. It would be wrong to say, however, that Western culture is not malleable. During the golden era of Western Empire, thinkers would develop ideologies declaring the supremacy of white Europeans. In the Descent of Man, Darwin wrote that the civilized races will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races. One example of many used to dehumanize Black Africans sold into slavery and erode the culture of natives swallowed by empires. Supremacy and the hegemony of Western thinking remains a key element of Western identity. Neoliberal capitalism, where money rather than need dictates the flow of resources, was expanded globally by Thatcher and Reagan and has cemented the economic supremacy of post-imperial nations over the global South. Make America Great Again reminds over half of white America of a time when they held hegemony over geopolitics, security, and culture. And even secularism, which supports other Western progressive values such as equal rights and the freedom of expression, have only been given their high status because they differentiate the West from primitive cultures, despite how accurate this is. From my own experience at school, telling someone you believe in God is met with eye rolls and judgment. They remind you of how close-minded your beliefs are. Ironically, should I say. The foundations, therefore, of Western identity are individualism, experience, and supremacy. When we consider the beliefs and values that shape Muslim identity, we see a very different picture. The first word that every Muslim hears after they are born is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. This is the most fundamental principle of Islam, and its recitation at our birth and ultimately our death is a reminder of how no part of a Muslim's life can be separated from Tawheed. The next words we hear are Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, acceptance of the Prophet and of the Prophet Muhammad and his message. The Quran forms the basis of all Islamic belief. Without these, one cannot say that their Islam is their religion. And what is interesting about these foundational principles and central to Muslim identity is that they are universal and unchanging. Muslims from any part of the world will share these beliefs entirely. The Quran has remained unchanged since it was brought by Prophet Muhammad. Think of Bilal, a black slave freed by the Prophet to become the first man to recite Adhan. He transcended the status of servitude and came willingly to the oneness of God. And the universality of these beliefs is central to every Muslim's experience and identity since the time of the Prophet. It is as if the oneness of the Ummah is a reflection of the oneness of God itself. Therefore, we can say that the foundations of Muslim identity are its universal principles, belief in Tawheed, Muhammad, and the Quran. So now that we have our definitions for both Western identity and Muslim identity, we can shape our understanding of Western Muslim identity. It is sad to say, but these things are often considered immiscible in that they do not gel well together. When a Muslim is asked whether they are Western, what they are really being asked is if they are loyal to the supremacy of Western identity, whether they have backwards beliefs or are closed-minded and judgmental. It is interesting that a Western culture of religious plurality does not find the best of our beliefs and adopt them, taking our best rather than our worst. And in order for a Muslim to qualify as Western, they have to surrender parts of their beliefs that are seen as archaic. If we look at prominent Western Muslims like Sajid Javid, one of the Conservative Party, he is a self-described cultural Muslim. Regardless of the fact that we don't know what this means, he drinks alcohol and does not practice Islam, but we call him a Western Muslim. And when we look at France, where they have banned hijab because it is not Western, despite the fact that the habit has been in place since the year 500, we continue to see the supremacy of Western identity overtake the freedom of religions for Muslims. Because it is not that Western identity and Muslim identity are incompatible. It is that Western identity will always push aside anything that does not accept its supremacy. And we accept the supremacy of God. And that is why this house should believe there is no such thing as a Western Muslim.
Wow, thank you, Muntazir. There's so much to take in there. So just to try and summarize, the identity of the West is focused on individuality, experience, and secularism. Whereas for Islam, it's, your fundamental beliefs, the Shahada, Nubuwah, the Quranic belief system, which are all universal and unchanging. And the oneness of the Ummah correlates to the oneness of Tawheed. Whereas to take on board a Western identity, you are forced to compromise and push aside your Islamic values. So thank you so much for that. I would like to invite Sister Sabiha to please come forward and make the opening statements opposing the motion.
Sabiha Bai, your time starts now.
Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters, and my esteemed audience. I thank my honorable opponents for their opening presentation. Now, as is protocol, we are supposed to oppose the motion that there can be no Western Muslim identity. But I'm here to tell you that we cannot oppose this motion. That's right, we cannot. For the simple reason that the premise of this motion, the very foundation of the motion, is fundamentally flawed. It is folly to argue against something that doesn't make sense. Let me explain this stance by giving you some definitions of the words Western and Muslim. The Oxford Dictionary defines the word Western as one, an adjective, as in situated in the West or facing the West, and two, living in or originating from the West, in particular Europe and the US. So it is a situation, a location, a geographical point. Now, to define Muslim, which I don't have to tell my esteemed audience, comes from the one who professes Islam, one who submits from the root aslama. He submitted or resigned to the will of Allah. Now let's put the two together. A Western Muslim is one who submits to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and happens to live in a Western area. Now, I am positive that if I could see the faces of our esteemed audience today, the faces looking back at me would be those of Western Muslims. Devout Muslims living in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that live mostly in this country of ours. The very fact that we are able to have events like this by a community such as this opposes this motion entirely. Population statistics speak for themselves. The PEW Research Center estimates that an estimated 44 Muslims were living in Europe in 2010. The Statista Research Department states that the number of Muslims in the USA was 3.45 million in 2017. That's nearly 48 million people in Europe and the US who identify as Muslims living in a Western country, ergo, Western Muslims. If we extrapolate the premise of this motion, our worthy opponents will say that to be truly be Muslims, we have to be limited to a specific geographical area. I am intrigued. As Muntasir said, it's universal. The tenets of Islam are universal. I'm very intrigued, as I'm sure you all are, where this magical location is. But even so, does not Allah say in the Holy Quran, Surah 49, verse 13, "We have made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another." This clearly states that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His infinite wisdom, has designed us and the system of this world so that we are not in a fixed location. We are everywhere. The ayah continues, "The most honored among you in the sight of Allah is the one who is most righteous, God-conscious, the ones with taqwa." Do we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in a fixed location? This adhan that we recite, La ilaha illallah? Of course not. Allah says in Surah 57, Ayah 4, وَهُوَ مَعَهُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, and He is with you wherever you are. Why are we excluding Him from being in the West? Now, our worthy opponents have already started to try to convince you that being a Western Muslim means that you have to shed some of your Islamic values and assimilate with the whole culture and ethos of the country that you are living in. They will also bring arguments stating that there are places in the Western world where it is harder to practice your faith as already they have done. Our team will debunk these arguments thoroughly and leave you in no doubt that a Western Muslim identity is not only a possibility, but an inevitability. I will give you this. A Western identity does not mean assimilation. It means integration. Integration with the values that are arguably more Islamic than those seen in the Muslim world. Using the tools that the country we are in provides us with, enhance our faith. Again, the very fact that we're able to have events like this by a community such as this, with an audience such as yourselves, completely opposes this motion. Our honorable opponents will give examples such as France, Portugal, Belgium as places where practicing Islam is more difficult. But I ask you this, being a Muslim is living in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The scale with which we are to be measured is that of taqwa. So who is better? He for whom practicing faith may be easier, or he for whom practicing some elements of his faith includes a struggle, which will increase in his taqwa, therefore epitomizing what it is to be a Muslim, living in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a Western country, a Western Muslim. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabiha. Wow, a lot to take in there as well. I can't wait to see, if we've got the likes of Muntasir and Sabiha, what the other speakers are like. So just to try and summarize what Sister Sabiha has said, it rests mainly on integration, not assimilation. So taking those aspects of our faith that, that make us who we are, the best parts, and that, the premise of this motion is fundamentally flawed. There are 48 million Western Muslims in the world, and looking at the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He said, "We have made you into nations and tribes so you may know each other." And that is the infinite wisdom of Allah, who is not confined just to the East or to the Western countries. And He has given us our struggles as a means of attaining taqwa. So thank you, Sister Sabiha. I would like to now invite Brother Peshak Salimi as speaker 2 from the proposing team to expand and give us your team's thoughts. Brother Peshak, please.
Uncle Peshak, your time starts now.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Salam alaikum, all dear brothers and sisters. I have to start by emphasizing on the modern or today perception of Western. We're not talking about a geographical point that you can pin. It's a state of mind. It's a mindset that is structured and forced upon people through media. And this structure is made in its institutes. You have philosophers who worked on this, like Hegel and Kant, Francis Bacon, Machiavelli, and so on. The idea of westernization is, like I said, is about how you perceive yourself, how it forces you to focus on self-interest only or unless there is a greater good, which in a Western system is the system. I'll give you an example. You are forced to stop at a traffic red light, and if you cross, there is penalty. So that's an element of the system that ensures that by doing so, the system can place some order in place. But in the very same system, if you cross many ethical or moral red lines, there is no penalty. There isn't even a perception of moral, ethical red lines. We are constantly told that this is a free society, that people are entitled to their opinion. You can pray, okay, and you can fast, but you can have those in your mind, okay, without even realizing it. On the other hand, let's have a look at what Islam is proposing here. In no way Islam is implementing any form of chaos. Islam does not and command Muslims to cause chaos. Islam doesn't say, "Oh yeah, go ahead, cross the traffic red light." No. But what happens, as much as it cares about social order, it cares about monitoring and observing the right to Allah and the right to others. Okay, it doesn't. As Tom says that you have the freedom, but you have to monitor your obligation. You should not be happy about where you are. You have to improve yourself. Okay, that's exactly opposite what the Western mindset tells us, and there are numerous of examples. However, as the time is limited, I need to run to the conclusion or to the bottom line. The bottom line is, as human beings, we have free will. We are created free. So yes, practically, you can draw a red line based on the Western values around your religious beliefs, or you can enforce the Islamic restrictions around the habits and mindset that the Western system of thinking imposes on you. Now, the fundamental question is, which path is worth it to take? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually asked this question from us as creators. Okay, where in Surah Yusuf, ayah 39, he's asking us, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is asking the two inmates. Okay, he says, I'm just going to go through the transition. Is it good to have variety of masters, or is it good to have one Allah who is unique and omnipotent? Okay, that variety of Allahs can be the greed, the unlimited believing, unlimited freedom, or you get your guidance from one unique Allah in all aspects. Inshallah, I hope that I managed to convey my statement. And like I said, we are not talking about geographical spots. We are talking about school of mind and mindset. Thank you very much. Wassalam.
Thank you, Brother Hadi. So, looking at it from a state of mind rather than a location, where in the West, your mindset is forced upon you, and it is one of self-interest and self-propagation. I love the example of the traffic light because I can attest to being in Eastern countries where when there is a red traffic light, the cars tend to accelerate towards it rather than stop. So with that point, I am totally with you. But, talking about Islam, yes, you have your free will, but it's not just about self-interest. You have the rights of Allah and the rights of others, and you have your moral obligations. So the question is, which bit is ring-fenced in red? Who is your God? Is it the God of self-interest, or is it the one unique creator? So thank you for those arguments, Brother Hadi. Right. Brother Fazle Abbas from the opposing team, we would love to hear your team's reasoning.
And Fazle Abbas, your time starts now.
Normally helps when you're not on mute. Sorry about that. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Firstly, I'd like to thank our opponents for presenting a very well-structured and good argument. I'd just like to pinpoint a few things. My esteemed opponent, Brother Muntazir, talked about how when you're being Western, you have to be supremacy, like Western supremacy, white people are greater than the others, slavery. But I'd just like to ask, does that not exist in the Arab world today? Is not the Saudi royal family consider themselves to be supreme? What is going on in Palestine? What's going on there? I'd also just like to give you guys an example. When the Prophet came to Arabia, he had a different society and he changed it. But he did not change it completely. He had some things about Arabian society that he liked. For example, in Arabian culture, they had certain months of the year where they did not fight. And he kept that. He said, you know, this is in line with Islamic values, so we will keep this. But there were other things about Arabian culture that the Prophet did not like and were not in line with Islamic values, such as burying of girls. So he said, we'll keep what is in line with Islamic values and we'll get rid of what's not. And therefore, I do not see why we as Muslims in the West cannot do that. Why can we not look at what the Western values are and keep what's Islamic and release what is not? For example, there are a lot of Western values such as welfare, environmentally friendly, things like that. While, drinking culture and things like that, we can not do that. And I just like to ask, does drinking culture not exist in the East or in Muslim countries? Was Yazid and Muawiyah not Muslim leaders? And further to that, I'd just like to say, there is a verse in the Quran that says, all you who believe, my world is wide, so worship me and me alone. And in this case, Allah is talking about his earth. And it is his earth is wide, and him we have to worship. And we can do it anyway. The other thing is another verse, Surah Nahl, verse 125. It says, invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and kind advice. Another hadith by our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. He says, be examples for us without using your tongues. Therefore, it says that it is our duty as Muslims in a non-Muslim country to spread Islamic values towards them. It is not that by being in the West, we accept their values. No, we can be here and still not accept their values and actually try to have the Westerners try to accept our values. We can try and teach them some stuff. And Islam encourages this. In fact, it is a question that I would like to pose to my opponents, which if they can answer would be absolutely great, is if Islamic values have nothing to do with Western values, then why, and I repeat, why is Islam the fastest growing religion in the West? Now, I'd also just like to point some other things. Muslims who live in the East, Shia and Sunni, there tends to be a lot of conflict between them. And there's a lot of Shia-Sunni fighting. Take, for example, what's happened in Syria. But in the West, where we are, Shia-Sunnis tend to live in harmony with one another. Do they not? And which one is more in line with Islamic values? The fighting with each other or the living together in harmony? And with that, I'd like to
45 seconds to spare.
Anything else you'd like to add, Brother Fazl Abbas, or are you happy with that? Perfect. Well, thank you very much. So a very pertinent question, that if there can be no Western Muslim identity, then why is Islam the fastest growing religion in the West? Looking at the Western white supremacist ideology, is there no supremacy in countries like Saudi and Palestine? And even, regarding the question of Sunni and Shia brothers, is there any supremacy involved in that? However, looking at those of us living in the West, living as Sunnis and Shias in what can be regarded as a more harmonious state, isn't that the kind of Islamic values that we want to propagate, as encouraged by Rasulullah, as referred to in the Holy Quran, as spoken about by our Aimma? So thank you so much, Brother Fazl Abbas, for that. And now the third and final speakers. So Brother Abbas Huda, I'd like to invite you up to give us a little bit more insight into your team's position, proposing the motion, please.
And Abbasfa, your time starts now.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Firstly, I would like to respond to statements from the esteemed opposition. It was stated earlier on by Sister Sabiha that being a Western Muslim is about integrating into the West. Firstly, it was stated that Western is not just a geographical location, it is about a mindset. But in terms of integration, it forces us to restrict how we are as Muslims. It is a definition of integration is about bringing one thing into another and amalgamating it without it standing out. It's, for example, like bringing kids of special needs into a general school. It's just not compatible. It's not going to work. There's catering that needs to take place. And also, I would like to mention what Brother Fazl Abbas stated about what happens in the East and in, for example, Palestine. Now, the only reason Palestine no longer exists on the map, at least, is because of Western influence. And also, same with Saudi Arabia. They have a very Western mindset in terms of supremacy. But I would like to continue in terms of my points, following on from my team member. And the freedoms and habits that have been cultivated by living by Western standards has given us the opportunity to limit how we live as Muslims. Are we living as Muslims by name, or are we Muslims inside out? So living in Western society means there are Western expectations. One such expectation is being content with the state of public toilets. Why is it that when we have chosen to live in Western society, that where we can live how we choose to, that we cannot even expect to get basic necessities such as clean water in the toilets? Yes, I agree that the state of public toilets all around the world is questionable, but in the Western world, where we are generally more widely educated, we should know better. It is a difficulty that we have to bear with. And imagine, my dear listeners, we have to travel around the country having to pre-plan our toilet breaks and even carry an extra bottle. The foundation of Islam is based on cleanliness. An example is where Allah states that Allah loves those who purify themselves. Hijab is also another important aspect of being a Muslim. In Western societies, it's acceptable for Muslim women to leave their hijabs behind. How can something so beautiful from the Islam's perspective, which is also empowering to women, can be seen as backward when Western society seems to promote women by wearing minimal clothing and plastering on adverts all over the media? Is that not objectifying? It seems backwards to me. Think about it. What did those in the primitive era wear? Therefore, how can the Muslim identity fit in with the Western identity? It just doesn't make sense. Another point I would also like to state is that Islam is not always tangible to those who do not understand it. By this, I mean Western society doesn't have any religious basis or any greater good overriding purpose. The Western society is all about due diligence, limited to not only doing anything wrong, and also not breaking the law. In contrast, Islam has a foundation which is based on actively doing good deeds, which was also mentioned in the Quran. Except those who repent and believe and do good deeds, Allah will change their evil deeds into good deeds, and Allah is most forgiving, merciful. Western society is all about living in the now, the experience, the fame, fortune, and power, focusing on improving one's physical self only, neglecting the inner self. Islam doesn't push this ideology. Islam stands for peace, love, and is filled with spirituality. Islam allows for freedoms, but in line with the teachings of the religion. We are not encouraged to try anything and everything, as we have guides such as the Quran and the Prophet and his family, which have stated that trying everything is not spiritually nor physically good for us. A survey that was completed by Pew Research in 2011, asking non-Muslims in US, Russia, and Western Europe what traits they would associate with Muslims. And it is shocking that the top answer was 68% stated fanatical and 50% stated violent, whereas tolerant came in at 30% and respectful to women was 22%. It's shocking. As Muslims, we pride ourselves on being spiritual people. We aim to do good deeds such as charity and helping those less fortunate. Why? All in order to achieve peace, to plan for a good hereafter, because we believe in the life after this life, which will be forever. We have directed to do good as much as possible, which Western society may not negate, but it is unfortunate that Western society rewards showing off, an example being giving charity and actively promoting it. This is contradictory to Islam, where the Prophet has said a person should practice charity so secretly that his left hand should not know what his right hand has given. Western society is incapable of understanding such beliefs, as it is based on the seen, what is physical or tangible. No depth, no clarity, no peace. Peace comes from the spiritual, from prayer, from faith, from belief, therefore from religion. Therefore, calling ourselves Western Muslims is a threat to ourselves, to our religion, to our faith. It means we are calling ourselves faithless Muslims. Therefore, I would state that the nation is not flawed, and I concur that there cannot be a Western Muslim identity.
Thank you, Brother Abbas. As with the other speakers, a lot to take in there. So, are Western Muslims faithless Muslims? The Islamic viewpoint focuses on achieving a good end in the hereafter, and that is why we focus on that inner peace, on the good deeds that we do, whereas the Western society is focused on living in the now, especially the physical aspects. And there is no depth, no clarity, and that is why you don't achieve inner peace. And, you know, regarding integration into society, we are essentially restricting how we live as Muslims, looking at, certain Eastern countries. They still have, in some ways, a Western supremacist mindset. Regarding integration and assimilation, I love your example about traveling around the country planning for toilet breaks. So if we had truly integrated, then we would have facilities in those bathrooms for washing ourselves. But the fact that we have to carry around bottles of water does that mean that we have assimilated rather than integrated? So I think a point all of us can relate to, Brother Abbas. Thank you for that. And finally, I would like to invite Sister Layla Dori. Please provide us with your final arguments representing your team's position. Sister Layla, please.
Layla, your time starts now.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers who have spoken so far. I'd now like to go through my points. So I'd like to open by stating that the Prophet has said, God has made the entire face of the earth as a mosque and its soil is pure. That means that that anyone is allowed to practice Islam anywhere in the world, east or west, meaning that that Western Muslims can exist. The opposition has said that the West hasn't catered to Muslims, but I'd like to refute that by saying that that there are groups in the government, such as the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group, who are working to tackle crimes against Muslims and to improve their lives in Britain. Also, if the West hasn't catered to Islam, why is it that there are so many mosques in Britain. And if you say that that the West is supremacist, why is it that that Muslims have been growing why is it that Muslims have been growing in the West since the 8th century, like my team member said? At present, 6.3% of the UK population is practicing Islam, and PW Research estimates that it could grow to around 10% by the year 2050. And 85% of these Muslims in the UK identified themselves as British and feel they belong to British society. Now, these Muslims have both been born here and have migrated here from other countries. Migration or hijrah is one of the earliest actions in Islamic history, and the Prophet was a supporter and instigator of hijrah, and was a firm believer that you should travel the world for knowledge, safety, and spreading Islam. The chapter 4, verse 100 of the Quran states that whosoever migrates in the way of God shall find many places of refuge and vastness. So Allah is encouraging traveling to different countries, and for both religion and knowledge. And he also said that the earth is spacious enough to flee and to find safe places to practice Islam when the place that you are in doesn't cater or it doesn't seem to accept Islam. It also suggests that the countries that the Muslims are fleeing to should welcome them with open arms, and should support these Muslims to live there as Westerners. Another thing that's contributing to the growth of Islam in the West is people converting to Islam. In the UK, 5,000 people per year convert to Islam, and in the US it's
4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And this is 2,500. 25,000, sorry. Converts such as Muhammad Marmaduke Pixel has provided a translation for the Quran that's become renowned, and Abdul Kalim also founded the first purpose-built mosque in the year 1889. So I'd like to summarize by saying there are such things as Western Muslims, because Muslims have grown throughout the West despite supremacy, and the West not catering to them properly. And there are Quranic hadiths and verses that say that you can practice Islam anywhere. I hope I've made my points understood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Layla, for drawing on the Quran and Hadith, and actually looking at the views of the Muslims living in the West, in particular, the Pew Research that you mentioned, that 83% of Muslims living in this country identify and feel that they belong to British society. And that is a mixture of people who have been born here and those who have migrated. And regarding migration, there may be some Muslim groups, some Muslim sects who can actually practice their faith with less risk of harm than, for example, a country like Saudi Arabia. We have people in our own community who have migrated, for example, from Pakistan because of the risk to their lives practicing their faith. So maybe it isn't as clear cut as living in a Muslim country. when you're thinking about where you can practice your faith freely, that, you know, you've talked about government groups who actually consult on tackling hate crimes against Muslim. The fact that 5,000 people per year in this country and 25,000 people per year in the US actually convert to Islam. So those numbers are growing despite this Western supremacist ideology, and that this earth Allah has made spacious enough for us, you know, to be able to practice our religion, and that includes in the West. So thank you, Sister Layla. So that's part one of the debate finished. Everybody at home, I would love you to please join us in a virtual recitation of a loud salawat for all of the participants. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Okay. Now,
so we're now going to commence the free for all round, the open fire round, which should be exciting, inshallah. We have been receiving some questions and comments on our Slido. Thank you so much for bringing in those questions. Right, so we have a few questions from the audience and a couple from the judges. We're going to have 15 minutes allocated to this, and we'll try and have 3 questions to each team, inshallah. So what I'm going to do is I'll commence with the judges' questions, then I'll bring up the Slido screen, and then we can see what the audience have been saying. So the first question from the audience. And I believe this is posed to the, sorry, just give me a second. This is given towards the proposing team. So, if shocking poll results show views of Muslims, isn't it even more important that as Muslims we demonstrate that we aren't these terrible things by living and engaging with those in the West? Proposing team, what do you have to say for this?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question, just so that we definitely have it?
Of course. The question is, if shocking poll results show views of Muslims, isn't it even more important that as Muslims we demonstrate that we aren't these terrible things by living and engaging with those in the West?
Okay, so in what you've said that there is a shocking viewpoint of people that have poor opinions of Muslims, right? So I think the first thing, there are 2 parts to this that you really have to break down. The first is as to what these shocking viewpoints that people have are, and the second is the response, like the level to which Muslims already go on to actively make themselves ingratiated into society, and still the fact that they have to face discrimination. So the first is the shocking images that they see, which are actually produced by a really, really twisted media culture. Despite the fact that in the year 2001, after 9/11, George W. Bush stood up and said to people, Muslims are not responsible for this. This is not the practice of Islam in the destruction of the 2 towers. This is not a valid representation of Islam. We've begun to see an increasing level of anti-Muslim hate crimes that have continued to this day and have actually been capitalized on by Western political systems. In fact, you see the emergence of far-right groups now being the main source of terrorism, despite the fact that government programs like Prevent simply target Muslims as the core people of that terrorism. And so basically, regardless of what Muslims do already, they are being painted by an unfair brush against them. The second point is what Muslims already do. Now, we are in Ramadan right now, and I'm not going to say that every Muslim has the best representation is always exemplifies with the religion perfectly. But from visiting our neighbors and bringing them food, to visiting the elderly, to making a part in our communities and society, I would argue that we already do so much. And sure, we can do more, and there is always more that can be done to promote and protect those who are the most in need. But if we fundamentally believe that there is not a fair attempt given to propagate a better viewpoint of Muslims, then how, no matter what we do and no matter what these shocking images they see, that will be the belief structure that they always have about Muslims. And so as much as we can do more, and there is aspiration in that to produce a better idea of what Islam is, surely us continuing to be the Muslims that we are and promoting a good quality of Islam will do that fundamentally. And whether anyone else wants to listen will be up to them.
Thank you very much for that, Muntazir. I think you answered that question in a holistic manner. We have another question that's come in from the judges, and this is posed to both teams. So it'd be nice to hear from both teams on this. Basically, the question is, most of us, for example, we have a Khoja culture. We do our Azadari in Urdu, perhaps other languages. But so our Azadari style is Asian. Our Latmiya, sometimes that we recite, Arabic, Persian. Majalis style can be Omani. So what identity are you even talking about? Because you don't even have an identity of yourself. You're borrowing from other people. So what is the take of both the teams on this?
Can I start if that's okay?
Bismillah.
Okay, so when we talk about culture here, I'm very glad that somebody brought up the whole premise of culture, because culture is extremely important to all of us. We each have a culture that we identify with. And for the purposes of this debate, we're talking about a Western Muslim culture, which we wholeheartedly believe is a culture that we have now created in this part of the world. And for example, there's Azadari, like you mentioned, in this part of the world now. And for example, in this very community, our culture of Azadari has evolved. And this is our culture of Azadari now. We may not do it exactly in the way that our forefathers did, and we don't do nothing as or do minimal as is the Western ideal, particularly, but we have our own Western Muslim culture now. And the growing population in this country, especially in the Western world, is of our own Western Muslim identity, and the culture that it brings with it is important, because this is what is going to be passed down to our generations. We can't just have the cultures of our forefathers. Everybody has their own cultures. And Ayatollah Sistani himself states that keeping hold of your culture is important. And this is our culture. Our culture is this Western Muslim culture. We cannot say that we completely are doing what our forefathers did, or in the other parts of the world where we may have originated from, because we do not. And none of us do. We are not doing it exactly in the same way. We are doing it in the way that our current culture is dictating, our integrated culture that has taken the best from this society and using it for the purposes of Islam, for the benefit of being true submitters to Allah. And we are using, this is our culture now, and this is what we are bringing forward.
Thank you, Sabiha Bhai. So you're saying that the opposing team is taking the stance that this is our culture. It may be mixed, but this is our culture, and this is what, bringing in the Islamic side of things, Ayatollah Sistani is telling us to stick to our culture. So why give it up? Does anyone from the proposing team have anything to say to that, or the question?
Yes, can I?
Please.
Basically, when we talk about Islamic identity, the language is not part of it. I'll take the example that is on the question, the Azadari, the commemorating. The act is to remembering or commemorating the tragic event of Karbala. That's the act that is common between all Muslims. Whether it's in Gujarati, whether it's in English, whether it's Farsi, it's regardless. Everybody, regardless of their language or even their cultural background, love Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Everybody who reads a part of Quran or part of Nahjul Balagha can have nothing but respect for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Imam Ali alayhi salam, again, regardless of their cultural background. I've seen people, and atheist people, that I was talking to him about Imam Ali alayhi salam, and at the time of, at the day of his martyrdom, I actually tell him that tonight I'm going to attend an event. And when I said that what the event is, he said, why? He had tears in his eyes. He said, why? What did he do? To me, that's a proof that when we talk about Islamic identity or Muslim identity, it's about a message to our what you call it, instinct or fitra, regardless of wherever you are, what skin color you have, what language you speak. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that, Uncle Pejak. Just wanted to touch on a couple of comments that have come in from the audience. Someone says, if there is not a Western Muslim identity, then why is this entire debate in English? So time to whip out your languages. Another thing that's been pointed out is that culture and religion are surely not the same. However, Muslims in the East adopt Eastern cultures and Western Muslims adopt Western cultures, which is an interesting thing to say, because it goes back to what we were saying, that we have amalgamated different cultures. We have some Indian things, some Pakistani things, and we just kind of blobbed it all into one. Sajidabai, you have a question?
Just an amalgamation of some from previously. So,
Sajidabai, I'm so
yes.
sorry to pause you there. Sabiha Bai has a refutation to make.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes, sorry, Brother Hadi was talking about that the core message was that we all love Imam Hussein, and we recite these Latmiyat, Munajat, and all the nohas that we do. And this is exactly my point. In this society, we have taken that love of Imam Hussein, taken the love of Allah and Ahlul Bayt, and we have incorporated it into this Western country, using the tools. For example, in our previous cultures, we may have not understood completely what we were saying. If we can stick to the culture, a lot of our children and a lot of us will not understand fully what we are saying, what we are reciting. But because we are now Western Muslims, we are taking these nohas, these latmiyats, we are translating them, we are doing them in English. Like I said, this whole debate is in English. We are taking it and making it our own, and making our own culture, and making our own identity, our own Western Muslim identity, and using it for the benefit, so that we can all access these beautiful poetry, the Quran, the du'as. Everything is now being recited in English, which is exactly proving our point that this is our Western Muslim identity.
Thank you, Sabiha Bai. But you say that we're turning everything into English. Surely this is saying that what we had before was not compatible with what we have now. So the proposing team, any comments to make on what Sabiha Bai has said?
Can I answer that?
Please go for it. Bismillah.
Okay, so like I said, it's not a matter of language. That Sister Sabiha emphasizes on that. You have to take the element of language out of this equation. Like I said, because you can be anywhere in the world. Okay? The point is that this love and respect of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Let's take an example. With a Western pluralist perspective, Imam Hussein alayhi salam is someone who is just a respected figure for a group called Shias, okay? And that's just as valid as some other characters for other sects of Islam, or even other religions, okay? Now, what we have to ask ourselves is that way of understanding or looking at Imam Hussein alayhi salam correct? Or is Imam Hussein alayhi salam at his time, when we call him Hujjatullah ala khalqeh, like Imam Mahdi Ajalullah Ta'ala Farajah Sharif in our time, Hujjatullah ala khalq. Do we mean it? Does it mean that he is the reason of Allah over everybody, regardless of the current state whatsoever? Okay, so again, I have to emphasize, it's not about the geographical position. It's not about the language. It's about what do you choose when a value of Western culture or Western thinking system becomes in conflict with Islam. Which way do you choose to go for? Okay, it's nothing to do with the language of commemorating. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There is something from Abbasba.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate what brother just said, and also refute what Sabiha was saying in terms of us having had translated everything that we'd had from 100 years ago in terms of the Quran, Hadith, and everything. It allows for us to understand it. However, there's always a loss of meaning. There's always a loss of understanding, and it's just lost. And going forward, it's just going to get further more and more lost in the future if it carries on this way. If we don't hold on to what the Quran is, the fact that it was released in Arabic, it was written in Arabic, and it was brought down to those of Arabia for them to be able to understand it. But that doesn't mean that we can't translate it. But there is. When you look at translations of the Quran, there's always differences. There's always areas where there'll be different understandings and for us to be able to get a message. But we have to go back to understanding what the Arabic is. It doesn't mean that we can't, that we shouldn't. We should only stick to what we know. We need to learn and go out and do research to find out what the actual meanings and teachings are, rather than just accepting how things have come out and how things are in the West.
Thank you very much for that refutation. There has been a question that's come in. We have our own identities, and then we've traveled into another country for many of us. Some of us have been born and brought up in the UK, in a Western country, others have not. But for those who are living in the West, is there an aspect of Jihad al-Akbar going on there? Because someone who is perhaps living in a Muslim country, Iran, wearing hijab, easy, more everywhere, adhan, you go pray, nothing to hide, nothing to plan, you just go and you do. But in the case of a Muslim in the West, perhaps you have to speak to your manager, this and that. There's more that's being assessed. Is there anything that Rida Ba perhaps, or Fatima Auntie, would you like to come in here?
Yes.
Go ahead, Fatima, please.
Okay, so basically on the argument that why are we not united, or why are we not one nation? There's an ayat in the Quran that Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا وَلَكِنَّ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِيمَا آتَاكُمْ فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. In another ayat, similar, it says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that had we wished to create you one ummah, we would have done that. But we chose you different so that you know each other. But most importantly, to grant you the rahmah that Allah has for you. And like you said, Khadija, the test is there for us to actually liyabluwakum. This liyabluwakum is to test you. Fima atakum, with what we have given you and how you make use of that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us with a test, and the greater the test, the greater the reward. So us being in the West, we might be tested with different challenges. Yes, but I'm getting this sense of confusion at the moment where we're refuting an argument when we're saying that there is no such thing as Western Muslim identity. And then on the other side, we are arguing for the same values. So I'm a little bit confused with the way my respected opposition party is going at the moment, but I thank them for their views so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Rida Ba, would you like to come in?
Thank you. No, I think Fatima, you should be on our team, because you're making points that we were going to make ourselves. This is exactly it. Yes, it can be difficult to practice our faith in certain Western countries, but like you say, jihad is a fundamental tenet of our faith. Part of this internal struggle is part of our faith. No matter where we are, we're going to find these challenges. Yes, in some countries, it's difficult perhaps to wear the scarf or to say our prayers. But the beauty about Western values and Western culture is that it allows us the freedom of expression, the freedom of protest, the freedom to be able to go and to stand up for our rights. What is happening in France is no different to what was happening 30 years ago in the UK, for example. Our mother's generation, some of them struggled to wear scarf in school. But what happened? They were allowed under the Western basis of the rule of law and the rule of protest and the freedom of expression to come out and say that this is not right. And through their appeals and their protests, slowly they were allowed to wear scarf. And alhamdulillah, today we see now that there is no issue with our daughters and our sisters going to school, going to the workplace, being able to identify openly as Muslims and have no qualms and issues whatsoever. So I would agree with my esteemed opponent in the opposition who has made our point for us. And perhaps if I were to say, well, if we were to say, well, if there can be no Western Muslim identity, then where can we go? Can you show me a truly 100% utopia where we can freely practice our Islamic values anywhere in the world? Look at so-called Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, despotic, autocratic regimes that we would have to hide our faith as Shia in order to practice in those countries. There is no one perfect utopia. At least the West affords us the ability to be able to practice our faith in relative freedom and have the ability to speak out when things are not in line with what we would like them to be.
Sorry, Ridaba, if I may catch you on that point, you say that we have adopted to this Western living and then our women and children are now, the females are now able to practice. France, what's going on there? Anything you've got for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, what is happening in France is no different to what was happening 30 years ago in the UK. What did we do? We protested, we appealed, we got together, we got more influential. Nowadays, you see, certainly in the UK, we are able to influence policy. We are able to influence places in government. We have people in the highest echelons of the UK political system. The mayor of London is a Muslim. We have Baroness Varsi. We have peers in the Lords and MPs who are Muslim. We have the ability to influence laws that are made in this country. And the same will happen in France through the struggle that takes place. There are now over 3.5 million Muslims in France, and they are getting slow representation. And through the influence of others who France will take lessons from, like the UK, and the influence of what is happening and the impact of the positive influence that Muslims have had in the UK economy, where we see that Muslims have risen to the highest of ranks. That slowly, through the struggle, the internal struggle of Muslims in France, inshallah, with Allah's help, that will happen. But it does not mean that we take ourselves out of the country and flee elsewhere. We take it as part of the struggle, which is part of our faith.
Thank you for that. Interesting point you made about a Muslim mayor. Muntazir, would you like to come on this, please?
So thanks for that, brother. It was really interesting to hear what you have to say. I do think that there are a few points that you bring up. So the first is of Baroness Varsi. Now, as we had previously kind of pointed out, you do have to give up parts of your identity to become a part of the Western establishment. And if you look at Baroness Varsi, a really truly practicing Muslim, but she doesn't wear a headscarf, right? So what representation does she give to people like us? The whole point of what we're saying here is that you have to subtract part of your identity to be accepted. And even then, her own party chooses to categorically pump out Islamophobic content all the time. In fact, it's used to pull in additional votes. To your point about France and the fact that we made all these changes and went on and look at what we did in Britain, there's 2 points on that. First, why is the idea of progress considered to be a forward arrow like entropy? The idea that because it's Western and there's a secular identity that exists in this place means that we will eventually attenuate to the position of acceptance is not true. As in, the arrow of progress does not move in a straight line. In fact, it bends and it comes back and forth. And it is only with the pushing of Muslims demanding the rights that are afforded to us under this law, that we are able to do what we have to. We shouldn't have to scream and shout and fight, but we do. And again, when we say that France will one day be better when it was better in the past is an odd position to say that it will return to progress. And again, even the fact that, as we've mentioned before, progress is a fundamentally Western idea, as if we don't have the ideas already set in stone as to what we think good and bad is, but instead we believe in this idea that things will get better because of the supremacy of Western identity, because things will continue to be where the money in the capital comes. And the final point that I wanted to raise with this, sorry, it's now just left my mind, but sorry, France. Oh God, it's completely gone. I'm sure everyone will accept.
Okay. We can come back to that if it pops in. Feel free to jump in. Thank you for that refutation, Muntazir. There is an interesting question that's been put up by Minhalba, who says, does the panel against the motion realize that the only reason Islam is the fastest growing religion in the West or the world is because of its increased birth rate? Yeah. So there you go. You've been shown up by the pharmacist.
I'll take that. We're talking about people converting to Islam, not necessarily being born Muslim. So I don't understand how increased birth rate, when they're talking about someone who's grown a Christian his whole life, chooses to convert to Islam. And Islam does have the greatest conversion rate. So it has nothing to do with birth rate. Okay. Interesting point, but it had nothing to do with birth rate.
Yeah. There is another comment that's come in. Fatima Jafar says that Ayatollah Sistani produced a Risala book for Muslims in the West. The title itself acknowledges the Western Muslim identity. This is going great. Unfortunately, we're running out of time and we really want to address all questions. Unfortunately, we cannot. Brother Muhammad Abbas Jafar has a question that has been upvoted, but I will let him call in and expand on his question. Proposers, anyone? Proposers?
If no one else will, I'll give it a go.
I think Brother Hadi has his hand up, so I don't know if he wanted to reply that.
Sorry, can I? Or okay. So basically, when there are some standard universal definition in.
Sorry, Uncle Pedro, I'm so sorry. We've just received a comment to say that they didn't hear MJ's question. I think that might be on YouTube side. I'm not entirely sure what's going on. But Muhammad Abbas, could we please ask you to perhaps put your question in the YouTube comments and highlight it? And then this way the judges know, as well as the audience, what question was asked. So sorry about this. And Uncle Pedro, I'll let you take over again. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Yes, so basically one core principle in a Western mindset is pluralism, or religious pluralism, or ethical pluralism. That's a well-known fact, in a sense that by definition it means that whatever you believe in it's your interpretation of truth. There isn't no exterior truth. There isn't no absolute truth out there. So whatever you believe in is valid for you, and you have the right to believe in it, and that's just good for you. Okay, our arguments is based around that, because with that mindset, whatever you do in terms of behavior, in terms of lifestyle, in terms of even weaknesses, you know, within your mental state, you think that, okay, everybody is different, everybody is entitled to their opinion, and you have no courage to correct yourself when there is no independent correctness. Okay, when they say Islam, Christian, Judaism, atheism, they're all the same. Okay, they're just people being, they are created because people have been in different places in the world. Okay, that mindset results in such lifestyle. Okay, and you know, I think the proposing team have been keeping saying that we are not talking about the country, we're not talking about the language, we're talking about the mindset. Yes, you can pray, you can say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Yes, at the same time, if we say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, at the same time we respect all religions, everything equally. Okay, that has a self-conflicting. Now, does it mean that I go around and disrespect other religions? No. We have a concept called getting along, not through pluralism, in a sense that you have reasons to believe that you are correct, not because based on your ego or selfishness, but based on what we know as dalil, burhan, reason, logic, which is delivered to you by Allah and the prophets and imams. Now, if others don't agree with you, it doesn't devaluate your belief. Okay, I refer to this statement from Hazrat Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. In her speech, she states that if all people around the world turn against Allah, Allah is needless from them. Okay, this should be a foundation in our belief, that what we believe in is it has an independent certification, if you like, from the most superior power. However, yes, people are free to agree with us or disagree with us. It doesn't matter. Besides, we never stated that the Western system and Islamic system are 100% against each other. No, certainly, whatever that has got a positive effect without compromising on other people's rights is Islamic. Okay, like I said, having order in society, it is definitely Islamic. Why is it that Imam Ali alayhi salam in his deathbed commands people to have taqwa and order in their affairs? So these two, as far as Islam is concerned, are hand in hand together. The problem starts when a man-made ideology takes bits of something and leaves some others which doesn't suit its benefits or interest aside. So that would be my answer to brother's question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just for the audience's benefit, unfortunately, we missed out the question. So Muhammad Abbas, may I please ask you to repeat your question? Has number one, number two, has Uncle Pedrak answered your question? And number three, does the against team have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Sister Khadeja, and sorry that you couldn't hear me earlier. My question was, and thank you to Brother Pedrak for answering my question was, is that the proposers have presented a particular view of Western identity, for example, which includes references to materialism, drinking culture, the poor state of public toilets, for example, saying that these things were incompatible with Islam. And my question was that, firstly, are we not stereotyping Western culture in the same way that we have condemned the stereotyping of Muslims? So my question was, is Western culture not, instead of being a single, well-defined viewpoint or identity, is it not more of a culture of freedom to express yourself, including in a way that would be considered Islamic, the ability for Muslims to be able to express themselves in a Western way. But I do thank Brother Pajwak for answering with his point about the fact that they are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And so, I hope everyone's been able to hear me this time, and sorry for the technical issue earlier.
Thank you so much, Muhammad Abbas. We have been told that we could hear you, so thank you so much. I'm going to ask someone from the opposing team to come in, and this will be the final comments before we move on. Running out of time, unfortunately.
Thank you. I'm happy to take this. Thank you. So, Brother Hadi, again, I think we need you on our side as well, because you're making arguments for us in terms of being against the motion. So, you mentioned that is a case of that not 100% of Western values are at loggerheads with 100% of Islamic values. And that's exactly the point that we are making, that it is absolutely possible to be a Western Muslim, because there are many things within Western culture and Western ideals that are perfectly in line with Islamic values. Things we talked about, the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the rule of law, democracy, all these are principles which are in line and compatible with our Islamic culture. So, and I think sometimes, the point you mentioned, perhaps is going overcomplicating things. I think if we look at things in the general sense and how most people would understand what a Western ideal is, most people would say that Islam is compatible with it, and that we can practice our faith in such a way so as to still stay true to our faith and take the bits of Western culture and identity that we please. But Western culture in itself does not compel you and impose anything upon you, which means that we are free to take what we please. And that perhaps and then same with Islam. There is no compulsion in religion. We hear in the Quran. In a true Islamic society, you cannot compel people to follow the religion, which perhaps is not the case in some so-called Islamic countries today. So the way I see it, we have the best of both worlds. We have the ability to practice our faith freely, and we have the benefit of certain Western principles that are compatible with Islamic values, which perhaps you would not get in Eastern countries. So I think I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rida Ba, and thank you so much, everyone. The audience, please forgive me for not being able to address every single comment or question that's come in, but we've been truly overwhelmed. I really don't want to end the segment. We were just saying, we don't need questions. We have a full-on discussion going on here. Thank you so much to everyone for participating in this free-for-all segment. I'm now going to hand over to Sajida Bai for our final closing arguments.
Thank you so much, everybody. We had scheduled in about 15 minutes and we just didn't want to stop there. Some really thought-provoking arguments, presented on both sides. And I think, we'll come away from this debate still mulling things over in our head. So now we'll move on to the final part of the debate, where we invite the fourth speaker to come and give their closing arguments. So on the proposing side, I would like to invite Sister Fatima Bendali to present the team's closing arguments. Sister Fatima, please.
And Fatima Auntie, your time starts now. Fatima Auntie? Fatima Auntie, your time starts now.
You're muted, Fatima.
Wait, okay. In this case, I'm going to stop the timer and I'm going to do it again.
Apologies, I had difficulties with the technology.
That's fine. I'm going to start your time now.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. Where do I begin? Well, I think the opposition party have done a huge favor. Starting with Sabiha Bai, thank you very much for that opening statement with Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That is exactly what I would bring to today. So Allah has created us in different tribes and so that we know each other. Certainly the most noble in the state of Allah is he who has taqwa. Now, as far as taqwa is concerned, It comes from the word wiqaya, which means waw, qaf, and ya, meaning protection. And now, when we look at this word, taqwa, the word itself, when we try to define it in our Western acquired or integrated languages, we cannot find a definition. And therefore, ironically, we may feel taqwa in our hearts, we may experience it, and we may even observe taqwa in the state of being muttaqi, yet we cannot define it in a language which is assimilated. And therefore, the argument being that we need universality of the Quranic language, which is the language in Allah. Now, alhamdulillah, we have something in common, all of us. And I think we should celebrate our commonalities in the face of being Ramadan and the sake of unity. We are all Muslims. Alhamdulillah wa shukr. And so was Nabi Ibrahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ibrahim kana Musliman Hanifan. So he was a doer of good and Muslim. And yet the Western world paints us, the Muslims, with Muhammad only, because they characterize him with characters all over the place. And they want us to fit a narrative which fits their narrative. And I'm not saying, and I'm not saying that everything in the West is bad. I'm here, I live in the West, and I celebrate my identity. But we have to make a distinction between what it is that with Allah, what is the criteria of success with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Now, on the other hand, we have Arabia. So there's one side, Nabi Ibrahim, geographically far apart, place, I don't know, for the brevity of time, we're not even going there, but there's Muhammad in Arabia. So people like us, the Muslims who follow Muhammad, the Arabs, the Bedouins, say, Amanna, we believe in you. And they were told, hang on, hold your horses. You don't believe anything, say aslamna, say we have submitted, because Islam means submission. So there are levels that we need to clarify. So when we say aslamna, because then you say, why is that? Well, because the faith has not yet entered your heart. So now we're moving from taqwa to the state of heart. Why is that? Because the heart is the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resides. Because as you know, in Arabic, the heart is qalb. Qalb is something that is constantly transforming, evolving, moving, turning. So the turning is towards the fitrat Allahi fatara nas alayha, what Allah has created us for, which is to turn to Him. Allah is the one who yuhibbul tawabin wa yuhibbul mutatahhirin. Allah loves those who turn to Him. So what is the argument today? There's 2 points. One is that to be a Muslim or to accept it, we have to accept it with our heart, which again is an organ which is multidimensional. When we look at the heart, there's the pumping heart. Some of you are pharmacists and doctors who would know that, so I'm escaping that. And there is the other dimension, which is the spiritual. The heart is the fu'ad, the qalb. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the whole universe will not perceive me, will not understand me, but a heart of a mu'min, a believer, will contain me. So if you want to know where Allah is geographically, where we are, east, west, I just wonder that if this argument or if this debate was being held in North Pole or South Pole, would we be saying northern Muslims or southern Muslims? It just doesn't make sense. So Allah knows, innahu alimun bitatil sudur. He knows exactly what is hidden in our hearts. So when it comes to the heart, we read often, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalb ala dinik. Oh, you who transforms the heart, transform my heart to your faith. So the faith is established by the heart. Allah lives in the heart, because this is the heart that when we go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-yawma la yanfaqu malu wala banun. Nothing that in this world will matter anymore. All these accumulations of Western world and wanting more and capitalism will stay behind. Illa man atallaha biqalbin salim. Only the one who is going to go to Allah with a pure and purified heart. So my dear opponents, esteemed colleagues, with all due respect, there cannot be East or West. There cannot be a Muslim identity which is different to what we're discussing, because East or West, alhamdulillah wa shukr, Islam is the best. Wa akhir dawana, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.
Thank you, Sister Fatima. I love that analogy and your expansion on taqwa, and that Allah lives in our hearts, transform your heart, and that is how you will transform your faith. And I loved your line, you know, East or West, Islam is the best, or Allah is the best. So thank you so much for that. And I would now like to invite Brother Rida Huda to make the closing statements, please, for the opposing team.
Rida, your time starts now.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So to summarize, my dear audience, thank you once, firstly, to our esteemed opponents for their arguments in this debate. So a reminder to the audience, the motion is that this House believes that there can be no Western Muslim identity. So let's get back to what the motion is. And as my esteemed colleague, Sister Sabia, mentioned at the very beginning, this is just a case of fact. Western Muslim identity. It's a question of fact. Do we live in the West? Yes, we do. Do we class ourselves as British Muslims living in Britain? Yes, we do. Would American Muslims living in America class themselves as American Muslims? Yes, they do. We're not talking about ideology here. We're simply talking about identity. If I asked you in the audience to tick a box, and perhaps in the census you probably did, as to how you identify yourselves, I'm sure you would have no qualms identifying as a British Muslim. You are not, by disclosing yourself as a British Muslim, assigning yourself to everything that would be considered an ideal in British culture. You're merely saying that I'm Muslim and I live in Britain and I'm proud to live in this country, which affords me the ability to practice my faith freely, to express myself freely. No doubt, there are times when it can be a challenge to practice our faith in the West, and there are no bones about it. This was raised by the opposition, and we accept that in certain countries, France, for example, it has been difficult. But as we said, jihad is part of our faith. It is an integral part of our faith. It is a tenet of our faith that we will have to struggle. In every part, even when Islam was being revealed in the time of our dear Prophet, there was struggle going on to practice our faith. In the time of the Ahlul Bayt, there was struggle going on to practice, to openly come out as Shia because of the political situation at the time. But it's about integration. We are not saying that because it becomes difficult, that we should assimilate into British culture and just become one of them. No, we are integrating with the aspects of Western culture that is in line with Islamic culture. And like we said before, there are many so-called Western values that are in line with our Islamic values, much more than can be said for certain so-called Islamic countries. Things like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, democracy, protest, human rights, welfare state, the rights of women, freedom of religion, animal rights, and the list goes on. And most importantly, protection from prosecution, because we have the rule of law. The same could not be said in certain Islamic countries where we would be prosecuted. We would not be given a free trial, for example, as we saw with so many of our ulama in places like Saudi Arabia, who would be imprisoned without any basis whatsoever, would not get the ability to be able to go to a court of law to freely justify their case. Why did we come here in the first place? Why do we all migrate to the West? Because of the quality of educational establishments. It is an accepted fact that the best educational establishments exist in the West, which is why we came here in the first place. The Western advances in technology have created things like the internet for us to be able to have conversations like this. It's Western advances that have created things like YouTube, from which Islam is being propagated at an unprecedented rate, which is why we're getting so many conversions, because there are platforms and mediums like YouTube and other media channels that allow us to propagate our message, that allow our ulama, our scholars, to be able to teach the religion and to spread our message far and wide, touching all corners of the globe. This happened in the West. It did not happen in the East. And I would ask, my dear opposition, that if not West, then where? Is there really a country in the world which is 100% perfect? is there this 100% utopia where we can go to and say that, yes, this is what this country or East, wherever it is, there is no place in the world that is perfect. So finally, I would say, what is better? To live in a country where we are free to practice there despite others that maybe don't, or live in a country where we have restrictions on practicing freely? So to conclude, finally, on clean water in toilets, just to that point, identity is a question of fact. There can be absolutely a Western Muslim identity and one that we can be proud of.
Thank you very much, Brother Rada. I loved how you said, I would like to ask the other team when you know that they cannot come back with a refutation. I thought that was very clever. A fantastic summary. Again, reinforcing the fact that you do not necessarily assign yourself to everything in this culture, even though you regard yourself as a Western Muslim or a British Muslim, but actually focusing on those aspects of Western culture that align with Islamic ideology, and followed up with the examples that you gave. And I really liked how you said that we are propagating our religion through media, through channels, and means such as YouTube, which are essentially, Western inventions. So, thank you for your summary. Right. So that concludes the debate section. I think, both teams, we would, myself and Khudaija, we were just blown away by the arguments and, the level that you guys have come in with, taking into consideration that, not everyone has had debating or public speaking experience. You've all given strong, structured arguments. And I would like to ask the audience at home again to join us for a virtual recitation of a very, very loud salawat for all the participants. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Now it's time for the judges to confer. We don't envy their role after witnessing what we have done. We do have an interesting interactive segment lined up in the meantime, though, while the judges are convening. So I'd like to look back at the results of poll 1, where we had about 93% of people who were opposed to the motion, who believe that actually, yes, there can be a Western Muslim identity. So we can see that there's a very skewed and polarized viewpoint, almost unanimous in favor of one particular side of the debate, in favor of the opposing team, which means, as I mentioned, there isn't a level playing field. So to judge the winners of the debate by the audience, if there is already a strong disposition to one side, isn't fair. So that's why the winners will be decided by the judges who've been provided with their criteria. We do want to get an idea, though, of how well the audience members took to the arguments that were presented. So, dear audience, taking into account what you've heard today from both our teams, are you still of the same opinion? We'd like you to go back on Slido and enter the same code 26950. Poll 2 is running. So please answer. Having tuned into the debate, do you think there can be a Western Muslim identity? Yes or no? So please do vote on poll 2 regarding the motion. Poll 2 is open, but not for too long. Mahdi Madrasah would like to share the Dalil Help the Hungry campaign, and poll 2 will close after the video segment. So please do jump on to poll 2 on Slido.
I'm looking at the results of the polls. I've hidden it from the audience. It will be announced later, but I'm looking at it right now, and it's getting interesting. It's really getting interesting.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Kareem. We are students of the Daily class and representatives to help the hungry project with Ramadan.
So first off, what is Help the Hungry? Our ambition is to spread the benevolence and generosity of by donating to disadvantaged.
Especially over the last year, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to many relying on food banks.
Every year, Wessex Jamaat goes to the food drive, and we are asking for your help. Physical items are restricted due to COVID, and we are asked for monetary donations.
Please donate by clicking on the PayPal link in the email sent out earlier. The link is also on your screen now. Please quote the reference, help the hungry when donating online. The food drive will go on through the whole of Ramadan. Concluding dates for collection is on Eid al-Fitr, Friday 14th of May.
So donate generously and help the hungry.
Okay, so as mentioned, there is still time to donate until this Friday, the 14th of May. As you know, the COVID pandemic has really hit communities hard. And in fact, that is the very reason we are gathering virtually. But really, that's such a minor issue in light of, things like increased poverty levels and reliance on food banks. So please, let's take advantage of these last remaining days of Mahdi Ramadan to help the hungry in our local communities. Poll 2 is now closed and the results will be announced towards the end. And now there is one final poll. So you, the audience, will decide who the two best speakers are, one on each team. So again, please do go to slido.com if you're not on there already and enter the code 26950. Now, poll 3 is multi-select. Based on what you've heard today, please vote for the best speaker in your opinion in each team. So you'd need to select one speaker from the proposing team, which should say 4 in brackets, and one speaker from the opposing team, which should say against in brackets. So you will be voting for 2 different speakers. Please make sure that they are on different teams and not the same team, or we will have an issue with numbers. And the winners voted for by our audience will be announced at the end by Sheikh Fazla Abbas. I'll now pass over to Sister Khadeja.
Thank you so much, Sajida. So we're going to leave the poll open, but in the meantime, I do have some exciting news. So when we started off this initiative of setting up a whole debating platform, we have a much bigger vision in our heads. It's not just about this one-off event for entertainment purposes, but rather it is to enable our community members to get together, develop those public speaking skills, debate together. And of course, like we talked about it earlier, it's such a transferable life skill. So in light of that and the overwhelming response that we got from the members of Wessex Jamaat, this is not the only debate we will be having. Inshallah, we will have a second debate on the 29th of May, so not too long to go, and that will have a brand new panel of speakers. The motion will be, this house believes that the mother tongue has no future. So I feel like we will have a lot of opinions on that. You can see the poster on your screens now. The interesting bit is that the winners team from today's debate is going to go head to head with the winners team of next time's debate 2. They will go together against each other in debate 3, the grand finale. and that will be the winning debating team of Wessex Jamaat. So please, please, please do pencil in the date in your diary, do show up, and do participate. Speaking of audience participation, there's something that we would like to touch on very quickly. Sajida Bhai, one of the comments you mentioned that came in from the audience.
Yes, I think it's unfortunately been posted as anonymous. So there can be a Western Muslim identity, but it shouldn't be how we define ourselves. We are Muslims first, and then we split into our creeds and sects. And I would like to, I'd like you to think about what Sister Sabiha said in her opening statement, that the whole premise of the motion is flawed, and we actually specifically worded it in that way. And what we really want to say is, perhaps rather than identifying as Western Muslims or British Muslims, because putting that word first implies that that is the more important aspect, should it instead be, I'm a Muslim Brit or a Muslim living in the West? So that's something I'd really love to explore. So Khudeja, I don't know if you want to weigh in on here, or if anybody else wants to post any comments.
I think that's a very interesting way to spin the motion on its head. And I think identity is such a huge part of our lives. And I guess I'm speaking as someone who has seen two different parts of the world. I was born in Kenya, lived there for 10 years, and then moved to Portsmouth, been living here ever since. So I have seen the Eastern and the Western side, and it's hugely different. And I think if you were to ask me right now, what place do I call home? I would say Portsmouth is home. Because I'm just trying to think, when I was younger, everything was okay. There was no space for me to grow as such. Madrasah friends were the same, school friends were the same. And then moved to Portsmouth, hated having to, explain to people, why are you wearing a headscarf? Why are you wearing an abaya? Why are you going away during lunchtime to say your prayers? And suddenly I felt really attacked. And for those of you who know, I hated that year. I wanted to move back. And it was, as a child, it was a very, very traumatic experience for me. So identity conflicts are huge. Sajida Bhai, I'm asking you as someone who's been born and bred in Wessex, have you had any sort of identity conflicts?
I think I did growing up, because I was one of the very few Muslims actually in my school. And when I grew up, I didn't wear hijab until I was 16, and I went for Umrah. So, on one hand, it was a little bit more difficult. I didn't have that culture growing up that we do now. I look at my daughter, and she is so lucky to have two of her best friends in her school, in her class with her. They decided to wear hijab together. They go and they pray together, and it's really amazing to see that. However, the girls that I grew up with, who are my closest friends today, until today, I view them as family. I don't view them as my friends. I view them as my sisters, and having that support network is what you appreciate growing up. And actually, being born here, you see so many different viewpoints, and I have such a wide variety of friends. And what I find is actually people can be very open-minded. They want to know about you, and you can't just be restricted to the person that you are, going to mosque and having that same group of friends. And as Brother Rida touched upon, it is our duty to propagate our faith. to have those conversations, to educate people, and people know how I am. So they'll come and they'll ask me things openly at work or my non-Muslim friends. And it's really, sorry?
Have you ever been asked if you wear the headscarf?
So the other thing that I've noticed about British society is that, if you're born here and you're a Brit or you've grown up here, you adopt things from the culture. So one thing that people love is a bit of banter. If you can get them on your side with banter, then that is brilliant, because it breaks down those barriers and it makes them think that, these people are like me. They're no different. So I had an incident a few weeks ago. I had a gentleman that I had in my clinic, a lovely old man, and he came in and he sat down and he said, oh, you Muslim women look lovely in those headscarves. I've always wanted to tell somebody that, but I've never had the opportunity. I said, oh, thank you. And then, bringing in a bit of banter. And I said, oh, well, it's great for a bad hair day. And he chuckled away. And then later on, he was fiddling about with his mask and he got so hot and he said, oh, I hate wearing these. And I turned around and I said, you know what? Try wearing it with a hijab. You end up looking like a post box. And it took him a couple of moments to click. But, in that short conversation, I had broken down, the stigma around discussing a hijab. But not only that, like how Western Muslims and British Muslims feel in this country. A couple of years ago, those of us who cover our faces being referred to as postboxers and bank robbers. And, there are ways of having those conversations. It's just finding the right way.
Definitely. That's such a funny story. I really love that personal touch. And I find it interesting that this gentleman felt comfortable to come and say that to you. And that's already saying something perhaps about how he views Muslims already, his perception of Muslims. Because I've had people in the past, they wouldn't approach me in the beginning, but then when eventually we started talking, and they'd be like, I was so scared to come up to you. Would you be offended or something? And I said, no, ask me. I'd rather you asked than assumed. And which that actually reminds me of a funny story of when I was in school. So I had told my friends, and my teachers knew that, I don't have any sort of physical contact with the opposite gender. And it's wonderful when I said that to my female friends, they stuck by it, and they would literally tell the other guys to just not, when they started hugging, just don't touch Khadija. And then this guy came up to me and he asked, so if I touched you, would you have to wash yourself with acid? And in that moment, I was thinking, wow, where did that come from? So it's really wonderful that you're able to have, even in your professional life, those sort of banterous kind of conversations. There was a question that I wanted to touch on. Just give me a moment. Okay, so here someone has said, sorry, Sajida, are we having a caller coming in?
Do you have one turning up? There may be.
Okay, well, nothing so far. By the way, if anyone from the audience would like to join our conversation, please drop myself or Sajida a message and we can give you the information, joining link information. Just wanted to say, so this has been the very first debate in Wessex, which is super, super exciting. And I think it's gone down really well today, alhamdulillah. When I was growing up, debating wasn't an odd thing. It wasn't a new event. In Mombasa, it was so common. It was, I think that's maybe just East African culture. There was a lot of debating in our Jamaats. And I guess when you move to Wessex, you realize there are quite a few differences, some pros, some cons. And one thing that immediately I noticed was, if you see in a small Jamaat, if you see a new face, you turn around and then you go to them and you say salam. And I love that. In Mombasa, you wouldn't do that, at least when I was there, because it was such a huge Jamaat. You stick to yourself. And this is one of the things that I love about Wessex, the culture of Wessex. It's really very much like a family. And I wondered whether anyone from the audience had anything to add about any differences, what they love about Wessex, if you've been born elsewhere, if you've been brought up elsewhere, what's it like being part of Wessex? Remember, we have our Slido that's open, and the code is 26950.
I think also not just how you're finding being part of Wessex, but, you know, like Khudeja's experience actually growing up in East Africa. You know, what do you find when you moved here to Wessex Jamaat? What were the differences? What do you appreciate from back home? But what do you appreciate here? And where do you now view as home? Where is the place that you ideally want to bring up your children? And I think we're in such a unique position to be able to discuss that. And definitely, Khudeja, Wessex is known as the friendliest Jamaat on the planet. So
I'm not going to say names, but certain Jamaats, talking about you. I'd like to add to that, Sajid, by the question that you asked. So the kind of things that I do today, alhamdulillah, are a fruit of Wessex. And for everyone who's listening, I want to sincerely thank you for being a part of my upbringing, being a part of my family. Sometimes I wonder if, you know, I didn't have the opportunities that I've had in Wessex, would I be the person that I am today? And the big answer is I highly doubt it. There's no. The fact that we have specific tailored kind of events, opportunities for people to get involved, whereas perhaps in bigger Jamaats, maybe it would be easier for you to get hidden behind the crowd. So having seen that kind of difference, I guess to me, it's really striking the difference in culture.
Also on that point, Khudeja, somebody has raised a comment which says, do not raise your children the way that your parents raised you, because they were born at a different time. And can you extrapolate that to a place as well? You know, do not raise them in consideration of the place where you were born, because, you know, where they are is ultimately different. So you tailor everything according to the time and place where your child is. So for example, you know, when we were growing up, certain things, you know, you wouldn't talk to your parents about. Whereas in Western culture, it's very open. But I think what you find is that if you grew up with, if you were first generation and you grew up with parents who had grown up in East Africa, you might not be able to have those conversations. But seeing the way that the culture is now, you're inclined to be, you know, more open with your children, and subjects that were possibly taboo before are not anymore. And that is, you know, one way of saying that, you know, I'm raising my child because they're born in a different time, but they're also born in a different place. So accordingly, you can tailor both aspects.
Definitely. I think with the being open is important now more than any other time because of what has been going on in schools, for example, the RC curriculum. And if parents obviously don't address that openly and speak about a topic that, you know, when I was younger, maybe would have been taboo. I mean, I didn't even know at the time, and now it's such a normal thing. But if parents obviously don't speak about that openly, then where do our children get their reference from? So 100%, being open about such things obviously has come with the culture that we're living in. A comment says, from someone says that the problem with culture, I love it all, but people mix it with religion. And I think with culture, it's an interesting thing because there are definitely some wonderful things that come with culture, but also some very toxic things or things that are not particularly helpful, to the extent where it becomes religion when in fact it is not. And it does become a bit difficult for people to put the two apart. Someone has said, I love the Al Mahdi Center. It's such a friendly family. Wish it was near me. whoever's comment that was, I wish we have the Mahdi Center open again soon, inshallah, so that we can all gather together for our gatherings. I said gather quite a lot there.
That's because we want to gather. We want to gather with everybody soon, inshallah. So Khadija, going back to that point that the person made about mixing religion and culture, I think, for example, it was brought up during the debate that the whole aspect of azadari and how we do azadari, and the fact that a lot of our nohas are in Urdu, and there is sometimes resistance to changing that, and it's not always met with positively, and I think that's something that can be left for the next debate, because I think it brings a whole new level that, are we mixing culture with our faith there? So,
that's
really
true. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have some very passionate points on that topic, but I shall not get to it before the debate 2. We'll leave it for the speakers of debate 2 to give us their points. Living in the West as it challenges, but at the same time, it enhances your belief structures and allows you to challenge yourself to stay within our religion. I think all of us can say that something like that may have happened to us. Maybe for the younger teenagers, they will be finding themselves at a time in their life where they'll have to push themselves beyond the boundary of Islamic Sharia. And then perhaps we learn and then we find our way back. But I think certainly the younger generation, the next generation will have it tough living in the West. But inshallah, I hope that this gets them some more.
I think we're going back to the point that, living here is our own form of jihad, it's our struggle, and that's what Allah will look at. We're not living in a country where it's normal to wear hijab, it's normal to pray, it is normal to eat, halal food. So we have our own struggle, but that in itself makes you explore, and it makes you, a lot prouder of your identity. And I've just been reading a book by Shalina Zahrajan Muhammad called Generation M, which touches on these very, very important aspects. And one thing that she's mentioned is that actually this younger generation are really proud of their faith, and they center everything around it more so than their parents. And they're not apologetic with it either. They're not apologists. They can enjoy life, they can enjoy the culture, but it's all within tenets of their faith. And another thing I wanted to bring in, I don't think this was touched on, it was touched on slightly during the debate, but it was that, so-called Islamic countries do not have Islamic values. Now, there was some research conducted by a professor, Hussein Askari, and it was something called the Islamicity Index, where he looked at all the countries in the world and he ranked them according to their Islamic values, and they looked at things like economy, legal and governance structures, human rights and political rights, and international relations. And the countries coming out on top, I think Ireland was top one year, New Zealand was top. And unfortunately, a lot of the Muslim countries were very far down on the list. I think the first one to appear was the UAE, and that was at kind of position 46. So, it goes to show that just because you don't live in an a Muslim country doesn't mean that you cannot follow your faith. And I believe that our judges have come back. Is there anything you wanted to add, Khadija, or any other comments on the screen?
No, all good. I just wanted to say that the poll is still going, but we will be closing it shortly. So if you haven't voted yet, please do on Slido 26950. Okay.
So we hope everybody enjoyed that discussion. We were really hoping some people would join us on the Zoom call, but inshallah, be prepared for next time. If you post on Slido with your name, we will send you the Zoom link so you can join us up here. And thank you to those who did actually comment on Slido to help guide our discussion. Poll 3, is it closed now, Khadija? Okay. I think we have it. Yeah. Okay. So poll 3 is closed. So now we move on to the segment that everybody has been waiting for. So our judges, welcome back. Before we pass over to you, I'd like to talk a little bit more about our judges. So Uncle Shabir, the absolute heart of our beloved Wessex family. You need no introduction, but I will provide one anyway. So Uncle Shabir actually has been supporting us from the beginning. He participated in monthly debates in Mombasa's Debating Society. And as I mentioned, he's backed this event from the start. He is heavily involved in local charity work, and his vision and passion is to safeguard the future generations within the bounds of the Islamic faith and perpetuate the love of the Ahlul Bayt. Shabir Uncle is an avid cook and a lover of nature, a hobby that our beautiful herb garden at the Al Mahdi Center will testify to. I will not tell you, but somebody spilled the beans about a running joke in the family. That you can fall asleep standing up, apparently, and even after a strong espresso. But taking in mind all the things you do, I'm not surprised that you're that exhausted, Uncle Shabir. So welcome, Khadija.
Assalamu alaikum, judges. On the judging panel, we also have Sister Shamim Manji. I say sister, really, I call you Shamim Auntie, don't I? Shamim Auntie is a born and bred member of the Wessex community. She is a qualified solicitor, charitable trustee, HR professional, and a mom to 3 really wonderful children. She holds 2 master's degrees in commercial law and human resource management. Shamim Auntie is currently studying towards a certificate in mental health awareness, whilst working as an HR specialist, advising senior leadership teams in a local multi-academy schools trust. Having worked with Shamim Auntie, I can say that she is one of the most inspiring people I know. A wondrous ability to establish a genuine connection with others and to see the best in them really, really leaves me in awe. As can be said of a few others you have met today, Shamim Auntie is truly a supermom in every sense. With a passion for exploring new places and cultures, most recently learning to ski with her family in the Alps. Wow, that's on my bucket list. Shamim Auntie is looking forward to traveling soon, inshallah, when the restrictions ease up. So, assalamu alaikum, Shamim Auntie, and welcome. We'd also like to welcome back Brother Muhammad Hassan Banji, who is also on the judging panel. He moved to Wessex in 2012 to read law at the University of Portsmouth, followed by a postgrad and LPC at Durham University. From a young age, Muhammad Hassan has been an avid debater, participating in various inter-school and community debates. He has represented the Mombasa Jamaat at the African Federation debates and participated in the Model United Nations Conference as a delegate. Given his extensive experience and expertise in articulated debating, it is no surprise that Muhammad Hassan is a holder of multiple awards, and I'm sorry, but I have to cut it down here. So some of them include Best Speaker Awards, Best Resolution Awards at the MUN. He won the Law Society cross-examination, and he also represented his university. So from participating in prestigious forums such as the Edinburgh Cup and Namda Novice, to judging the Durham Oxford Open Pro-Am Camp, Muhammad Hassan has seen it all in the debating arena. Muhammad Hassan is also one of the organizers of today's event. So between planning for the debate and keeping up with Ramadan, he has been frequently dreaming of the family favorite snack, samosas. I will let him explain to you why he's been obsessed with samosas. But we're also informed that Muhammad Hassan is good at starting fires, and I do hope that that is in the context of camping. But jokes aside, Whilst he has been behind the scenes very much today, Muhammad Hassan has tirelessly worked on this project and has acted as our debating expert. So we welcome the judges with a sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil. Participants, may I request you to turn your video cameras on? We really want the audience to see you when you hear the judge's verdict.
Sorry, we have somebody who has joined the segment, but we're actually a little bit late for that. So could we ask you to exit or turn off your video and mic, please? Thank you very much. Not you, brother. You're fine, Brother Hadi. Thank you. And can the participants turn on their videos, please?
Bismillah, judges, over to you. Let's hear the verdict.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I must say, very flattering introduction, Khadija. I'd also like to point out that Sajid Abai and Khadija have worked tirelessly on this project. I have taken the back seat, and I joined their calls to try and make them laugh and bring some entertainment, but they've been doing all the work. Inshallah, we've had a very good conversation, myself and my fellow two esteemed judges, and we've decided to break the next 15 minutes down as follows. I will be providing feedback to the proposing team. Shamin Manji, who's actually my Kala, will be providing the feedback for the opposing team, and Burabi Shabir Uncle will be providing feedback for the free-for-all and with a final decision. So if you've been waiting for the decision, I'm sorry, you have two other people to listen to really quickly. We'll try and keep it short and sweet. My overall feedback for the proposing team, brilliant line of argument. You came in strong, very well researched arguments. I like the way that there was a similar tone being pulled by the whole team. You argued the line very well that Western is not geographical. Western is an ideology, and each of you came and pulled that line. That was brilliant. The one thing I'd like to see you improve is your time management. 3 of the 4 speakers crossed the 5-minute line. It wasn't too massive in this situation, but it is something you can get severely marked down for. Starting off with the first speaker, Muntazir Jafar, the first speaker from the proposing. Muntazir, your beginning was spot on. It was really heavy, really strong. I love the philosophical arguments, the fact that you tied in history. You had a good dose of evidence. The one thing I'd like to see, in an opening section going forward, would be a layout, would be a roadmap, where you break down, the arguments that your team is going to have. And this is another point that the judges picked up on. Your content was brilliant. It was very strong, but it was a bit too strong. So build up to it slowly. It's clear you're operating at a different wavelength than everybody else. But inshallah, try and gradually seep into. But other than that, brilliant oratory. Overall super. The second speaker, Uncle Hadi Pejwar. Uncle Hadi, you started off with a rebuttal, and I absolutely love that. One thing about debating is the liquidity of the debate. And you came on with a rebuttal straight away. You towed the line, as I said earlier, about Western location and West not being a location, but being an ideology. I like how you transitioned from one point to the other. That was brilliant. The two things that maybe I would try and improve, add going forward would one be a clarity of argument. So, tie in one point completely, dwell into it to its maximum before you go on to the next. The other thing is maybe, Uncle Hadi, I know we're fasting, but a bit more zeal, a bit more oomph when we're speaking, take it a notch up, like Sister Fatima did, and I'll come to that in a bit. The third speaker, Abbas, honestly, that was absolutely amazing. I don't think I could mark you down on much. I think you were really brilliant in a lot of aspects. You came in heavy with rebuttals. There's one thing you mentioned, I think the person before you spoke about Israel and Saudi Arabia, you came in and you tied that into the Western ideology, saying, it's because of the Western influence. I found that very interesting. The fact that you tied some of the rebuttals into your points made them seem very, very flawless. You took a bit of a battling gun approach in the middle, which I really liked. You went on, you hit a lot of points at one point. That was absolutely brilliant. The only thing I would say to that is, as brilliant as it is a bit difficult. So next time, you executed it brilliantly. I would only add a bit more tone fluctuation and a bit more, points where points of excitement within them, if possible. The last speaker from the proposing team, Sister Fatima, when it came to oratory, you were something else. Your tone control, the way you delivered, the way you went through a point. You took us through the emotions of the point. And one thing I really liked was the way you broke things down. You started off with the concept, you broke it down further, you took us on a journey. That was absolutely amazing. That was absolutely brilliant. The one thing I would say, though, with regards to being a fourth speaker, is more of it's a summary role. It's more of a rebuttaling role. I think that would be absolutely brilliant if maybe you had played around with the format slightly, because if that would have come in earlier in the debate, that would have been phenomenal. And then in the end, you have somebody to come in and summarize and take rebuttals. But all in all, I think all the speakers performed absolutely well. Kudos to you all. It's a difficult thing. We're all fasting. We all got really dry throats, but you all did amazing. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to sit down and have this honor of being part of this debate. Thank you. I'll now pass on to Auntie Shami Manji, who will take on the second part.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, thank you so much, Khadija, for those really kind words. You're very generous. And thank you also to the organisers for including me today and inviting me to judge. I was a little bit hesitant to do so because I felt it was a huge responsibility, but I am so glad that I did, because I have learned so much and I have been so engaged and entertained by each and every single speaker today. So thank you. I've really enjoyed the opportunity. With regard to the team that I am commenting on, the opposing team, I would like to make a mention, first of all, as to how you did as a cohesive team. And I think that's a really good word. You worked incredibly cohesively together. Your arguments all backed one another. You built on them beautifully. It was a very simplified argument. It wasn't difficult to understand or complex, yet the way in which you delivered it was with such beauty that it was really something quite amazing. I loved how you supported one another in the free-for-all section as well, and how you rebutted the arguments that you were being faced with. Looking at each of the participants individually, I'd like to first of all address the first speaker, Sabiha. We, as a judging panel, we all commented exactly on how exceptional your roadmap was. We could completely see where you were going. Your definitions were spot on. They were clear, concise. Your content and your strategy was really it was bang on. There was nothing we could really do to ask you to improve that at all. One point in which we would have asked, or we would have thought that we could have seen some development for you, was in relation specifically to Muntasir's points. If we could have had a bit more of a rebuttal there in that opening section to hammer down the points that you were making, we would have loved to have seen that. But as I say, roadmap was brilliant, exceptional definitions, clear, concise content. Thank you very much. Moving on to participant speaker number 2, Fazle. Again, we were all taken away by how you came in steaming through with lots of energy. You rebutted from the very outset, which was, really putting the other team on the back foot. I liked your content. I liked how, as I said, you rebutted first of all with the supremacy argument, and you talked about the prophet and the workings of the prophet and how he changed something, but not everything. One thing which I and the other judges also felt was the ending was slightly abrupt. We would have liked to have seen a slightly more gentle closure of your argument, maybe a summary of what you had to say, just reinforcing the point that you were making, which was obviously the opposition of the motion. So that might be just something to think about for future, but otherwise exceptional.
Sorry, Shalimanti, just to put there,
Sure.
I know you can't see Fazle Bas on the screen for the audience, but Fazle Bas is here. He's just had to turn his video off, so he has had it. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. As for Layla, speaker number 3, all of the judges agreed. We all said this from the start. Your central argument was brilliant, Layla. We could clearly understand where you were coming from. You were just very clear on what it was what you were arguing, and your rebuttal again to the supremacist argument was was dealt with very early on, very swiftly dealt with. So we really liked that. So your content was spot on. We would love to see you engaging in more of these debates. We would love to see more of that confidence coming out in you. So please, again, your content was brilliant, and I would love to see more of you engaging in these subjects. I loved how you talked about the migration of the prophet in particular, actually, and how that was for travel for spreading of knowledge. So yes, excellent content, really well researched. Get involved more, and we'd love to see more of you talking and confidence, and your confidence developing even further here. And the final speaker in the opposing team, of course, was Rida. Again, the judges were all in agreement. It's really funny. We did not liaise at all during the debate at all, but when we came together with our feedback, we were all on the same page. And with Rida, we all said your oratory was exceptional. We were blown away by the way in which you picked together all of the subjects that your team had mentioned, that you brought it to a beautiful closure, summarizing your composure of the debate, and when you saw that the time was coming to a close, we loved how you just brought it to a close in a very swift, very final, very finesse. The finesse was exceptional. So the content was great, and the delivery was great. The strategy was great. All over. There wasn't actually anything I could think of that I could ask you to improve. So very well done as a team effort as well. Thank you very much. I think I'm handing over now to Shabaranko, who is going to talk about the scores for the session, the free-for-all session. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, mu'mineen and mu'minat. MashaAllah. I commend the organizers. You've done an absolutely brilliant project to begin with for the first time in Wessex, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all to inshallah prepare some further projects and encourage our youth and teenagers in particular, which will inshallah give this community amazing improvements in critical thinking skills, acquire their poise in speech and public speaking skills, retention of information that they have learned, self-confidence, inshallah, and enhanced teamwork skills and collaboration. So this particular project has really delighted me and I'm proud that we are back on the vision, developing our vision of Al-Mahdi, inshallah. Al-Mahdi Center has been on the map, and it'll go up further in the Western map as well now, inshallah. Now, the results. Without much ado, I will announce the winning team to be the opposition at 278 points scored by Sister Sabiha, Brother Fazl Abbas, Leila, and Brother Rida, 278 points altogether. But I must stress that this competition was so close, so close. It was amazing. We were literally 1 or 2 points away, and that is the case here. The proposing team earned 275 points. So you were just 3 points below the winning team. Sallu ala nabi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Thank you so much, Shabir Uncle. Ji, Sajid bhai.
Sorry, thank you. Before I start my next segment, I just want to draw everybody's attention back to the disclaimer which we put in throughout the program, that we heard some very strong viewpoints, and that these were, some of them were purely for the purpose of the debate, so they don't necessarily reflect the viewpoints of the individuals, whether they're on the proposing team or the opposing team. We wanted to bring in that critical thinking and thinking, outside the box and considering different viewpoints. So we do want to just stress again that the viewpoints today that have been shared may not be the viewpoints of the people presenting them. They are for the sake of the debate. Thank you, Khadeja.
Thank you so much for that disclaimer, Sajid bhai. Shabir Uncle, Shabir Auntie, Muhammad Hassan, thank you so much for your verdict. I love the thorough feedback that was given to the participants, the teams, and I think it's a huge a learning curve, inshallah. Then next time we can carry this on for the next debate. Just very quickly, Rida ba.
Thank you, Khadeja. I'd just like to thank you, the organisers, for putting this on. It's been so much fun. It's my first ever debate, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone that we really enjoyed it. It's been a great experience, and we look forward to many more of these to come. I'd like to thank my honourable opponents for putting up such a strong challenge. It wasn't easy. To argue for the motion was incredibly difficult, but you did an amazing job. Your arguments were very deep and complex, and for that, I commend you for doing that. We had to just make do with our simple and surface level arguments, which thankfully got us across the line. And of course, thank you to the judges as well. Again, excellent feedback, very thorough, amazing, and long may that continue so we can get more people involved, the more youngsters involved in taking part in these debates, which are great for for practicing the skills of public speaking and research and debating in a very very open and Islamic manner. So thank you all, thank you judges, thank you organisers, and thank you my opponents and my teammates, of course, for doing all the research and putting all those stats together. Thank you very much for that as well. You all did amazing.
Thank you so much, Rida. Very kind words. I'm sure we all share the same sentiment. Sajida bhai?
So firstly, a huge congratulations to the winning team and all the participants. I'm not surprised, and I don't think that Khadeja is surprised that it was such a close call. As I said, the level of the arguments and the strategy, the content, the style coming from all of you was brilliant. And I'm not surprised that it was such a close call. And now on the screen, you'll see the results from the audience poll. So it has actually changed slightly. Proposing team, you've won almost another 30% of people, and that's based on your arguments. So I think, starting from almost zero, you've done a phenomenal job of presenting your argument, as did the opposing team, but obviously you started a lot better off. Now, you also, the audience, you voted for the best speakers. So I would like to invite Sheikh Fazl Abbas to say a few words and to share the results of the best speaker, please. Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear mu'minin, to one and all of you. Well, when this project was launched with the organizing team, Khudaija, Sajida Bai, and Brother Muhammad Hassan, there was a question which was being posed to me, and that is, what does the madrasa have to do with the debate? And this is a question which perhaps people might be thinking, what does the madrasa have to do with the debate? My simple answer to that is that madrasa has everything to do with the debate, because madrasa should be a very safe place where we would like to encourage our children to be able to take part in critical understanding discussions, and it provides an environment for them to be able to flourish and nourish their iman as such. To be able to continue this environment as such, this is one of the points that this time we are having the adults of the community to take part, so they as parents will be able to get the feel or the taste of this appetizer. And we can already see in this participation of the parents today, they have felt the appetizer of the having this space in the madrasa, and inshallah through them, through these families, being a very small Jamaat, you will be the ones who will be able to encourage, to coach, to mentor now the young people in our community, the madrasa, so that this project of the debate becomes, inshallah, a thriving program for not only as a Jamaat as such, but one where the platform of the madrasa and the children will be encouraged to take part into it, inshallah. So before I would mention regarding the results of the best speaker for the poll which was carried out by the audience, I would like to take this opportunity to be able to first express the deepest appreciation to the participants from both the proposing and the opposing team. You have, mashallah, done a very brilliant, thought-provoking presentation. And I was impressed that not only was your presentation based on the aspect of our sacred text of Islam and Hadith, but also you dwelled into various thoughts and philosophical and academic scholarship taking place as such. So this itself is something which we would constantly like to encourage into being able to be one who utilizes aql, because aql is the one which is the basis. You'll find the hadith of Usul al-Kafi, the first thing which is awwalu ma khalaqa Allahu al-aql, that the first thing which he created was that intellect for men to be able to take forward over there. And this can be seen that, alhamdulillah, as Muslims in this part of the world, you have been able to sort of build a bridge between the traditions of Islam and the research of the academic scholarship, and being able to, at the same time, emphasize a very important part of our identity, and that is Islam as such. So to one and all of you, mashallah, I must say what Sajida Bai said is that we have been blown away. Rather, I would say we have not been blown away. Rather, you have really hammered our heads, all right, and the audience, and we're going to suffer from this headache for a very long time to continue questioning ourselves and have this conversation with our families, inshallah. Thank you very much for all the time which you put into being able to prepare these presentations for all sides as such. And to the esteemed judges, I truly do not envy the situation in which these organizers have put into this situation. But I must say that you have done your best in coming to a very fair and just conclusion when you disclose to us the points for both the teams. And from what I remember, they were so close, something like 3 or 5 points as such. I am satisfied that you did, mashallah, carry out a very fair and just discharge of the role which was given to you. Thank you very much for being able to take up this challenge in being on this spot of being the judges for the debate as such. And at the same time, I must say that the feedback which each and every one of you gave was really a well-balanced feedback, and one which was addressing it to every individual, which they will definitely appreciate. And I could see from the response of the gestures, the facial gestures, that it truly acknowledged the feedback which had given to them. So, Jazakallah khair to all the participants and to the speech, to the judges. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you increased tawfiqat and grant you success for being able to be the flag bearers or the trailblazers for this first ever project of Al-Mahdi Madrasah with regard to the debate. Jazakumullah khair, inshallah. Now, if I can contribute a few points with regards to the motion, which was that this house believes there can be no Western Muslim identity. All this time I was trying to look at one key word in this motion over here, and what comes to me outstanding in that motion is identity. And in today's ever globalized world, identity has taken a whole new meaning. For we see that more and more people, especially we Muslims from the second generation who are resident in the UK over here, are really grappling with this concept of personal identity. And we find that the people of the second generation immigrants are actually struggling with identity as part of them being able to reconcile it with the identity of the family, identity of the community, and at the same time, the identity of themselves as Muslims, and being able to identify with being British citizens over here. So as a result, what happens many a time, we have a confused or a disconnected Muslim from the community, or a confused and disconnected Muslim from the family as such. So here, I would like to perhaps shed more light over here that when Sajid Abai or one of the speakers was talking about that the identity at times comes about living in the Western world, the identity comes out people calling themselves as British Muslims or French Muslims or any American Muslims as such. And then a proposal was brought about that it would be better if we were to identify ourselves as, for example, I'm a Muslim Brit or I'm a Muslim American as such. And I feel that fits in very well over there. What is the reason for that? The reason for that I see is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is announcing to the angels as to what is the reason for creation of the human being, and he says, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, that indeed I am going to place on this earth a khalifa. So the earth, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning the earth over here, is not with regard to the geographical position, with the specific position, rather it is going to the whole of the earth. So this is giving a very clear message to us that Islam is not restricted to a specific part of the earth. Rather, in this ever globalized world in which we are living today over here, Islam is one which is going to put a mark on all parts of the world. What it calls upon us is to be able to see that at every moment, let our identity be able to reflect that identity of being a Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth. So when I say that I am a Brit Muslim, I am proud to say that I am when I say that I am a Muslim Brit, I would be proud to say that I am first a Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, by me being a Muslim, I'm a Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am now identifying in the geographical area which I'm living over there. For Islam is enhancing the good in all the areas which are over there. This is what I see Islam to be, that Islam is a fluid which can fill in any container as such. So if the container is on the western side, the geographical location, I as a Khalif will identify myself as a Muslim Brit. If a container is on the geographical side, let's say on the eastern side in China, then the Muslim over there would identify in saying that I'm a Muslim Chinese over there. So inshallah, let us all reflect that in this safe space over here, constantly reflect that ayah, inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, and to add some twist in being able to show that how a good Muslim Brit I am. Let me quote from Shakespeare in Romeo and Juliet, where he says, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So likewise, was in an identity. That which we call a Muslim by any other name will still remain a Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, insha'Allah. So I have the honor now, it is the time to be able to announce the poll, the results of the poll. And the best speaker of the proposing team is Brother Muntazir Jafar, and I am delighted to congratulate you, mashallah. Well done, keep it up. The audience have really polled you to be the best speaker for the proposing team. And with regards to the best speaker of the opposing team, I'm delighted to announce that it is Sabiha Bai Chandu who has been voted as the best speaker of the opposing team. So to one and all of you, I must say that it has been a really wonderful and a pleasant afternoon. And inshallah, not only with the headache of the Psalm itself, but the headache which you have given to us, we will continue in being able to reflect further on this thing. And inshallah, we look forward for the next round taking place. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you all increased tawfiqat and increase in your knowledge with a lot of barakah, inshallah. Thank you to one and all of you. Ahsantum. Shukran.
Jazakallah khair. Congratulations to Muntazir and Sabiha Bai. Very well deserved, although I saw the results and they were very, very close. Alas, there has to only be two best speakers, one from each team. There will be something small arriving at your door in the next couple of days as a congratulations. So please keep an eye for that. Keep an eye out for that. Just before we wrap up, I'm very conscious of time. 5 o'clock today, so that's in 3 minutes. We have a madrasa quiz. So Zoom fatigue going on today. You log out of this one, please join in with the quiz and support our madrasa students there. And a very quick word about the Tanzeel project that has been launched by the Quran department. Essentially, it's a very simple project. All you need to do as parents is read the Quran with your children, document it over a period of a month, submit that form to us, and the email has been sent out with further details. The students' progress will be celebrated when they get to 1/3, 2/3, and the final separa of the Quran. So let us all support our children in their Quran recitation and get them to enroll on the Tanzeel project. The final word, participants and judges, we will be going off air. We won't be live, but feel free to stay on the chat. We can have a quick informal conversation. Thank you, Jazakallah khair, and Khudafis, everyone.